welcome, please, a wonderful storyteller, Amy Biancolli. Amy Biancolli.
It was a few minutes before 10 a.m. in late September 2011 when I heard the doorbell ring. I was in the attic where I sometimes worked on movie reviews. At the time, I was working as a film critic, and I had been procrastinating on this one review. So when I heard the door, I was annoyed. But I went downstairs and went up to the front door and went up on my tiptoes and peered through the glass, and as soon as I saw them, I knew. Because we all know from the movies what it means to see two cops at your door. It means that something horrific has happened to someone you love. But I let them in. It was a man and a woman. They were kind, I remember that. I don't remember who said what. They must have asked me my name. I must have told them. They must have asked me if I was married to Chris Ringwald. I must have said yes. And they told me to sit down. And they said that a man had been found at the base of a hospital parking garage a mile from my home. And I said, "Did he jump?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Is he dead?" And they said, "Yes." And in that moment, learning of my husband's suicide, I felt my whole world shear away from me. I felt cleaved in two. That day, I did the toughest thing I've ever had to do. I told our 3 children. Our oldest was 17 at the time and on a gap year in Ecuador. Our younger daughter was a sophomore at Albany High. She was 15. And our youngest, our boy, was 11. He was in 6th grade. And that first night, my 2 kids and I didn't want to be apart. So we lay on the living room floor in sleeping bags and watched Battlestar Galactica. The new one, the really good one, the reboot. And we turned it off after a little bit and tried to sleep. Mainly, I just lay there thinking about all that I had lost. My husband of 20 years, who I was with him, who I would be with him, our future together, all our dreams, some of them really mundane. You know, we had always talked about becoming old farts together and walking the neighborhood, holding hands, and that was gone too. And yet, I knew I had to have a future, even though we weren't going to be buying that convertible after our youngest went off to college. I just didn't know what that future would be. I couldn't curl up into a ball. There had to be a next morning that I would get up, and then a next, and then a next, but what was the next? Oh, the week unfolded the way these weeks do, in a whirlwind of loving people coming by with casseroles and plates of ziti and meetings with funeral directors, the funeral, the wake. And at one point, one of the funeral directors came up to me with a question that caught me off guard. He wanted to know what I wanted done with my husband's wedding ring. Did I want to take it home or did I want it cremated and buried with him? And I thank you, but I want that ring. I love that ring. That ring was me on his hand for 2 decades. That hand held our vows, and it was a beautiful hand. He was a writer, but he had worked for years before that in carpentry and construction, and he had these big, thickly muscled hands, and it was a big ring on a big finger, and it had warped to his finger, and I loved the warp. The warp was our life together. So I brought it home, and I decided I didn't want to stuff it into a drawer in the dark. Instead, I put it on a chain and hung the chain on a hook on the back of my bedroom closet door. And that felt right to have it present because he was so present to me. I was so madly in love with him right from the beginning. We knew from the first date. 4 months after that first date, we got engaged. He didn't have the engagement ring with him when he proposed, but he went down to Manhattan, took the train, went and saw a jeweler named Bobby Satin, of all things. We used to laugh about it. It's like his name out of the movies, Bobby Satin. And came back up by train, actually got off in Hudson, and we had dinner there. And before he gave me the ring, he explained that the central stone was not a diamond. He said there were these little smaller stones that were diamonds that were flanking the central stone. But he said, I decided you're not a diamond. I decided you're a ruby because rubies are rarer. And that was the start of our life together. 6 months later, we were married. And for the whole time I was with him, he was the most extraordinary, charismatic, brilliant, interesting, giant-hearted man. And he was also the sanest, until he wasn't. He left his job, became anxious. The anxiety led to insomnia, which led to worsening anxiety and depression, and it all spiraled away into suicidality. And after 6 months, I lost him. And having lost him, there I was with these rings on my hand that I didn't know what to do with. I didn't know how long to wear them because there was nobody to tell me. When you lose your spouse, no one comes up to you and says, welcome to widowhood, here's the guidebook. There's no guidebook. There's no etiquette. There are no rules. All we have are musty old expectations, cliches, based in large part on movies and literature. We have the idea of the old ladies in black sackcloth dresses, murmuring over their rosary beads and maybe banging themselves in the foreheads with Bibles. And I'm Catholic. I own rosary beads and I own Bibles, but I wasn't doing that. Instead, I was hauling myself through every day, schlepping my kids, caring for them, writing, doing my best, laughing with my friends when I was able to, and all the while grieving my husband like crazy. And as I was doing those things, I had these rings on my hand that implied that he was alive. And I didn't know how long to wear them. And people would say, well, do what feels right. But I didn't know what felt right. Nothing felt right. How could anything feel right? I'd found these 2 online support groups for young widows. And I went on and I checked. And sure enough, there were whole conversations about this. Some widows and widowers said they removed the ring right away as soon as their spouse died. Some people said they melted them down into a new piece of jewelry. Some said they wore them on a chain around their necks. And some said, it's been 5 years or whatever, and I still feel married. I'm still wearing the rings. I'll always feel married. And I did feel married the first couple of weeks. You just do. But as the weeks turned into months, and the reality of my husband's absence set in, it became more and more painful. And when I say painful, I mean it literally. That's one of the things nobody tells you about widowhood, is that you'll feel a head-to-toe literal body ache. The loss of intimacy, both physical and emotional, the touch deprivation, it all makes you want to lie in bed at night wanting to be held by the person who's not there. And that hurt. And what made it hurt even more was the fact that it disagreed with the rings on my hand. The disconnect was too much. So finally, it was about 4 months after my husband died, I took the train down to Manhattan to see a movie. Because periodically, studios would make me go down there. Mostly I saw movies up here in Albany, but now and then there'd be a movie that they really didn't want to screen for me up here. Sometimes it was because the movie wasn't very good. In this case, it was a film called The Gray. It was a thriller starring Liam Neeson and a bunch of computer-generated wolves behaving in very non-wolf-like ways. And I thought it was pretty silly. Other critics liked it. But in any case, I was down there at this screening, chatting with a colleague. I don't remember who he was or who he wrote for. But in the course of this professional chit-chat, it occurred to me that if he saw the rings on my hand, he would assume that I was married, that I had a living, breathing spouse somewhere. And I did not. And this was not me worried about dating. That's not what this was about. It was just the pain of knowing that my husband wasn't there and my hand said something different. So I went home, and I talked to the kids. I wanted to make sure it was okay with them. And it was. They totally got it. And I went and I bought a very nice gold chain. And as I removed the rings from my hand felt lighter and naked and really weird. And it hurt. But it was an honest pain. It was a pain I knew I had to learn to live with. And I did. I learned over 2 years. And then about 3 months ago or so, I don't know what impulse made me do this. Just a random impulse, curiosity. I sat down on my bed with my rings and put them back on my hand. And I held it out. And it was an alien hand. It wasn't my hand any longer. With those rings on my hand, it looked like a hand from another life and another me. Too much time had passed. And so I removed the rings, put them back on the chain, and hung them on the hook on the back of my bedroom closet door with my late husband's.